So the topic of the 24th class is creating a nation 1783 to 1789 from multiple perspectives. Now, for those of you who notice these sorts of things, you're saying, hey, this is the same topic as yesterday, except for those last three words, from multiple perspectives. Okay, so let me just jump into the controversy. Okay, it's controversial right out of the gates. Now, the reason why I say this is how history is presented is controversial. There are states right now that are closely monitoring and changing social studies curriculum to create a narrative that suits their desired outcomes. It's a little eggheady. Essentially, they want children to learn a story that has them thinking a certain way once they're done with school. And it's very different here in Michigan than it is down south. And every state is going through this right now, okay? Now, when a historian chooses how to present the story, it reveals their points of view. And the challenge of history, and believe me, I go through this challenge every single day, is how to accurately present the story that it's objective and inclusive. And here's some modern pictures, okay? Black lives matter. All lives matter. This cartoon, well, I think that all lives matter. We should care exactly equally at all times about everything. All houses matter. Obviously, whoever made this cartoon is going to agree with these people and less with these people, okay? Now, here's your SAT word of the day. Polemicist. Cool word, isn't it? Now, polemicist is somebody who takes a controversial topic and establishes their argument and they try to win. It's a very contentious kind of thing. And people who enjoy that, I happen to be one of those people, are polemicists. They take a controversial issue, they argue their point, and they try to win the day. Case in point, I think if I were to take these people and put them together in a room, I think they turn into polemicists really quick, if you follow what I'm saying. Okay, so some people get very, very uncomfortable by this. Other people really enjoy it. Okay, so anyhow. So if you were absent, we did read an article from the Harvard Gazette from this man, Donald Iacovone. Very interesting. He read hundreds of textbooks throughout time to reveal the stories they were telling and how they shaped America. Very intriguing article. I'm not going to go over it in this video because the video would run very long, but here's the link. It's in the PowerPoint. It's in the Google Classroom, so please check that out if you were absent, okay? And before we get into the content, there's this word civitas, okay? Now, the word civil rights, a lot of times I say civil rights and, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, pop in people's heads, and you're not wrong, but it's bigger than that. So civitas literally means the city or the citizens of the city, all of the people. And what this means is civil rights. All people are part of the story. Okay, history happens. Whether you make the history books or not is a different story, okay? Now, history curriculum has become more inclusive since the 1970s, and it's likely because of the many civil rights organizations that were active during this time. So I'm going to show you a picture here, and what do they share in common? If you're going to be a Weisenheimer, they're all in black and white. Yeah, I get that. Because a long time ago, I'm old enough to remember black and white film was a lot cheaper than color film, just so you know. But as you can see, there's 5 groups, and they all felt that they did not get their full rights as established in the 14th Amendment. And being included in the history books was important to all 5 organizations, and they pushed to be included in the story. And it looks very, very similar. The methodology is very similar. Here's the women's movement, the gay movement, black rights movement, the American Indian movement, and there's Chavez and the Hispanic movement. Very, very similar. And one thing they all share in common is they wanted to be included in the books, in your history books. And it's interesting that your AP book took the same topic through 2 different lenses. Yesterday's class was more the traditional telling of the story, and today's class has to do from the lens of Indian people and black people and women. Okay, now I mentioned the 14th Amendment real quick. I'm not going to put all 5 sections, but the 14th Amendment reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. So all of these people were feeling, hey, we're not getting, the full, rights as citizens. Okay, So that's the controversial side of things. Now here's the content. The content is from pages 167 to 175, and it broke it down through the lenses of American Indians during this time, slaves, former slaves, those who claimed ownership over them, and women during this time. Okay, so in terms of American Indians, I think the best image to go with is the one on 170. And as Americans expanded from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Oceans, treaties were either ignored or disregarded. And there was resistance. There was American Indian resistance, both violent and nonviolent. They tried to go through diplomatic channels, warring channels. An example that they gave was Joseph Brant, the leader of the Mohawks, created an Indian confederation to try to have strength in numbers. Now, this resistance officially ended in 1924, so this went on for centuries. And if you look at modern times, we have a reservation system that was the outcome of centuries of this conflict. And the book emphasized this Treaty of Fort Stanwix. Now, this was a 1784 treaty between one faction of the Iroquois and the U.S. government that sought to end the violent battles over land in New York, Pennsylvania, and the Ohio River Valley to the west. And you can see it right here. Now, it ended very poorly, and I think the book emphasized this because this is a case study. This is, very similar to what happened again and again and again, where it did not end well for the American Indians, and it became a norm in American Indian relations. Okay, so anyway, that was the Treaty of Fort Stanwix. Now, then the book goes on to talking about slaves, former slaves, those who claimed ownership of them. I took a picture of the table in your book, and it's pretty self-evident when you look at this that the divisions are already in place, even 70 years before the Civil War. State and regional differences were quite evident. Okay, this only increased with time. And if you look at these, just for example, here, percentage of free blacks of the total population. Massachusetts, 100%. Kentucky, 1%. Okay, you don't need to be, a math expert or a data analysis expert to see the very obvious differences by regions, and we can guess how this ended, okay? And then we looked at women. Now, two female leaders emerged, and Mary Wollstonecraft, a brilliant writer, wrote a book called A Vindication of the Rights of Women, I read it when I was at university, and this is really the ground zero of the women's movement in America, okay? And Abigail Adams, wonderful woman. This is non-history statement here, but whoever you marry will make or break you, and history proves that, okay? There are some people who married very well. Justinian in the Byzantine Empire and President John Adams, and their lives were a lot better because they picked a good spouse. And then you look at people like Napoleon, who chose poorly and his life was problematic. So John Adams chose beautifully. And he wrote her husband, I long to hear that you will have declared an independency. And by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies. That's an important line. Remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. So we see the seeds being planted here. Again, eventually the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, which we'll learn about in the wintertime, is the where the movement really begins. But you got to look at Adams and Wollstonecraft as the seed planters of this movement. And what rose during this time was this idea of Republican motherhood. This was a belief that women should have more rights and a better education so they might support their husbands and raise sons that would be more politically active. Now, it's interesting. It's not for them. It's for their husbands and their sons. And I've been in cemeteries where I've seen gravestones where the woman loses her name. They lose their name. It's like, my wife, it would be Mrs. Anthony Salsiccioli, and her name would be lost to history because they became so basically the supporters of their husbands, okay, and not in and of themselves. So during this time, options for women were ultimately limited, but things will start happening coming up here in a few decades, okay? So we ended class with this assessment. It is the 6-1 review on page 176. I'm going to ask you to put your nose into the book here, 167 and 175, and AP style. Okay, don't make it a quick little blurb. Practice for the springtime. Get your writing strong. Please answer this question at the end of class. Did the Revolutionary War have a truly revolutionary effect on Britain's former colonies? How specifically did it impact different groups of Americans? Okay, so today was part controversy, part pretty standard issue AP, and in terms of what is right and what is wrong, in terms of how to write history, that is a challenge that I will face every day. And in my opinion, it's more of an art than a science to how to do that. But again, that's just my 2 cents. So anyway, thank you for watching.